So, there was some hugely significant results in the Premier League last weekend, wasn't there? Some very big, impressive individual performances and one or two shocks as well. And it sets us up very nicely for another massive round of fixtures for game week 26 this weekend, especially in the context of the battle against relegation, the race for Europe, and obviously the title race as well. This is the prediction show where we take a look at all the main talking points, all the stories around each game, and we give our predictions as well. Let's get stuck in. So first up this game week is the Friday night game. Love a bit of Friday night football. It's Leicester City against Brentford from the Walkers Stadium, and I'm a little bit baffled by Leicester. Not really sure what to make of them at the minute because they've lost their last 5 home league games without scoring a goal. They haven't scored at home, I think, in the league since early December, so really struggling. And they've lost 9 out of their last 10 Premier League games anywhere. So a terrible run of form, and yet in spite of all that, bizarrely, there's still only 2 points from safety, so a win here gets them out of the relegation zone. And they come into this one against the Brentford side, who've been very much a Jekyll and Hyde team this season. In the early part of the year, they were unbeaten at home. I think up to Christmas, they had the best home record in the entire league. They were fantastic at home. But they lost 7 out of their first 9 away games. Couldn't buy a win away from home, Thomas Frank. And yet that's completely flipped on its head recently because now they've lost 5 out of their last 6 home games and they've won 3 out of their last 4 away games. And those 3 away wins recently are actually quite significant for Brentford because they're the only wins of any sort that they've got in their last 12 games in all competitions. 3 wins, 7 defeats, 2 draws. So it's been quite a tough run for Thomas Frank and his team. But they do find themselves in 11th in the Premier League table, which is an improvement, quite a big improvement on 16th last season. And with Brentford out of both domestic cup competitions, not in any danger of going down and maybe 8 or 9 points off the pace in the race for Europe, which may be a bit too much, it's about this stage of the season where fans start to ask, what is it that's motivating these sides? What's going to keep them going? Because they're not fighting for their lives. They've not really got a target to aim for. Why are these players going to keep turning up? It often explains why there's patchy form coming from these teams. But one very important thing to consider why Brentford and many other teams around them in the bottom half of the Premier League will keep fighting to the very last game is the huge difference in prize money that's on offer. So Brentford received just over 15 million quid for finishing in 16th place in the Premier League last season. If they were to finish in their current position of 11th this season, they'd receive over double that, nearly £32 million. And that's a huge amount of money for any club, but particularly for a club like Brentford who, you know, for 15 million quid, they've picked up the likes of Johan Wisser and Mikkel Damsgaard in the last few years. So that might be the difference between them signing a player and not signing a player. It's massive. So I think Brentford will keep fighting. You know, they've still got an awful lot to play for between now and the end of the season. But do you know what, individually as well? Look, Brian and Burmo, Johan Wisser, there's still lots of players, Mikkel Damsgaard, there's still lots of players within that Brentford squad who I think have been very impressive throughout the season and maybe are just putting themselves in the shop window a little bit. And I just can't see anything other than a Brentford away win in this one. I watched Leicester last week against Arsenal and they were awful. You know, they had the moments. I think Arsenal were pretty poor, to be honest, as well, but Leicester were really bad. And I think that was Leicester probably close to their best. I've just not seen enough from them under Ruud van Nistelrooy to think that there's going to be an upturn in form coming round the corner. They had the shock win away at Spurs and then immediately went back to losing again. It's just, they've not got an awful lot about them. There's not an awful lot of quality in the squad. It doesn't seem to me, at least, that Ruud van Nistelrooy's coming up with any new answers in terms of changes to the tactics or the shape or even the lineup, anything at all that might suggest, you know what, maybe we can do something a little bit different to get... There's just nothing. There's nothing. It's the same thing from Leicester pretty much every week. You know, and I've got to say, it must be really disappointing for Leicester City fans because out of all those teams at the bottom, Wolves have changed their manager. Immediately comes in, loads more fight from the players. Maybe there hasn't been a huge increase in points, but actually the performances have been much better. You know, beating Man United, draws away at Spurs, beating Villa. Southampton changed their manager. In comes Ivan Juric. Again, Southampton looked, and still look to be fair, one of the worst Premier League teams we've ever seen. However, since Ivan Juric has come in, they look like they have a bit more fight and they look like they have a bit more going forward. Picked up a big win against Ipswich. Maybe they could, I don't think they will, but maybe they could drag themselves out of it. And Ipswich have always had a bit of that under Kieran McKenna. You know, they've had some big successes, haven't they? Beating Spurs, beating Chelsea, they've had a bit of fight. But it doesn't feel like we've seen any of that with Ruud van Nistelrooy. It just feels like it's got worse and worse with every passing week. Each performance looks more and more bereft of inspiration. There doesn't really seem to be any fight. The Spurs result was obviously an anomaly. I mean, there was a protest, wasn't there, from Leicester City fans last week before the Arsenal game, so maybe I am on the right lines, I don't know, but you let me know. Is it just me who feels this strongly about Ruud van Nistelrooy and the job he's doing? I don't necessarily think Van Nistelrooy is a bad manager, by the way. I just think it's a bad fit, and why wouldn't you roll the dice? Because it just feels like it's not going to improve. I don't know what they're waiting for. So with all that considered, I've got to go for a Brentford win, and I think it'll be fairly comfortable as well. So I think they've got the pace to hurt Leicester on the counter-attack. Leicester haven't got too many winnable games in the Premier League. You'd have to file Brentford at home as a winnable game for one of those teams down the bottom. So I think Leicester have to come out. They have to be quite aggressive and bold in their attacking play, and that'll leave spaces for Mbeumo, for Wissa and Damsgaard and various others to pile forward, and I think Brentford will take their chances. They're too good a team not to. So I'm going to go for Leicester City 0, Brentford 2. And that's exactly what my dad's gone for as well. So both of us going for a Leicester City defeat, both of us going for Brentford to win 2-0. Let me know what you think. So next up is the 12:30 Saturday early kick-off, Everton against Manchester United at Goodison Park. And as a Liverpool fan, I always look forward to this one because at least one of them's got to drop points. And look, as much as we've got an intense rivalry with both of these teams, I'd like to think that I dislike both of them equally enough that I can give a balanced opinion on this one. And Everton come into this one as the form team in the Premier League, don't they? Nobody's picked up more points than Everton since David Moyes came into the club, which is astounding when you think of where they were and just how bad they were under Sean Dyche. So, and look, as I said in previous videos, I've got to hold my hands up. I was baffled when they sacked Sean Dyche. I thought he was probably their only chance of staying up, and it's gone completely the opposite way. So, apologies, Evertonians. I read it wrong. I read the room wrong. I got that one absolutely wrong. And the biggest change in Everton, I think, since David Moyes has come in, has just been their willingness to commit more bodies forward in attack. They've got a different attitude, it feels like, a bit more cavalier, I guess, a bit more willing to throw caution to the wind. And under Sean Dyche, there was a bit more of a hesitancy to do that, wasn't there? You know, under Sean Dyche, they were very rigid, weren't they? They didn't want to break from that shape, that low block. The fullbacks were incredibly static, and they were content to hit the ball long to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. That was the only way they ever looked like scoring. Now it feels like under Moyes, they're willing to put a bit more emphasis on attack. The fullbacks are pushing a bit higher up the pitch, and actually, they're getting a bit more joy. You know, and as much as I've got it wrong with Dyche, I'm now questioning whether I've got it wrong with Amorim as well, because I've been adamant all along that Amorim will get it right at United. He's a brilliant manager, a very good tactician, but obviously there's been rumours come out this week. We don't know how true they are, but there's been players apparently leaking to journalists that, you know, the dressing room aren't quite happy with Amorim, that, you know, they've not got as much faith in his methods as perhaps they did have when he first came into the club. It just feels like nothing's getting better. It almost feels as dire as the Ruud van Nistelrooy situation at Leicester. I looked at his record since he came in, and I'll put it up on the screen now. It was unbelievable. I just can't see an end to it, and I don't know if it's the off-the-pitch stuff. You know, United's been a pretty toxic place with the ownership, the fans, the players, Marcus Rashford, all the noise around the club. It's just a beast. You know, it's just not geared up to be a place, an environment where players or managers can thrive right now, is it? You know, I think about the players who've come as massive signings and then been real big failures, and then they've left, and actually they get a huge lease of life and they've been brilliant. You know, you look at the way that Marcus Rashford's played in his first couple of games at Villa. Looks a different player. Anthony's gone to Real Betis, has been fantastic for them. You know, and you could apply that to so many players from United down the years, you know. It just feels like they get a big bag of bricks off their shoulders when they leave the club, and maybe when they're at the club, you know, Ruben Amorim looks 10 years older since the day he arrived. You know, it's even just the little things that Ruben Amorim's getting wrong at the minute. I mean, Sky were understandably critical of the way that he set Man United up against Spurs last week. Bruno Fernandes, who's Man United's most creative outlet, should really be in the number 10 position, influencing play in the final third and creating chances. We saw very little of that. I mean, there was a little bit in the early stages of the game. He creates a chance for Garnacho, but after that, he's pretty much doing the dog's work in midfield alongside Casemiro and trying to cover two positions for United. He He hasn't got the legs for that. That's not what his game is. It does just seem like managers try to overcomplicate it at times. And actually, it's simplicity that I think David Moyes has been most successful with at Everton. It's probably one of the things that has afforded him this magnificent run since he's come into the club. You know, he's obviously a very experienced manager, very likeable manager as well, David Moyes, and such a big history with Everton. He feels like he's come in and just brought a whole new freshness and an attitude change to the players as well. Going forward, there's definitely a bit more energy to them, definitely a bit more willingness to commit bodies, and that's a massive thing for Evertonians, especially in this last season at Goodison, because they've had it hard. They have had it hard. Look, as a Liverpool fan, I've enjoyed most of the ride, but they've had it very, very hard. And it's nice to see them enjoying these last few games at Goodison Park and going into the new stadium, a new era, and, good luck to them. I hope it's not that good, but good luck to them. And I expect they get a result here against the very depleted United side. I expect Ruben Amorim's going to have to field a similar 11 to the one that he had against Spurs, maybe the same bench of, 18 and 17-year-old kids. So there's not going to be an awful lot for him to call on if things aren't going to plan. And I think Everton will take advantage of that home Goodison crowd. They'll be raucous. They'll be absolutely bouncing for this one. And I think they'll get a win. So I'm going to go for... I still don't think Everton's attack's brilliant, but I really like Beto and he's in a really good run of form. So I think he'll get one. I'm going to go for 2-1. I'm going to go Everton 2, Manchester United 1. The Ruben rot continues. On to the Saturday 3 o'clock kickoffs, and it's Bournemouth against Wolves at the Vitality Stadium, and this one's got all the hallmarks of a really good game, I mean, for a start, Bournemouth are 5th, and depending on what happens in the other games between Newcastle and Nottingham Forest and City and Liverpool, there's an outside chance that Bournemouth could finish the weekend 1 point off 3rd. We're nearly in March! 1 point off 3rd, Bournemouth! Unbelievable season. Seriously, unbelievable season. For me, better than Forest. The way it's going, I think Bournemouth are going to make Champions League football. I've called it early, and I still think they're going to make it. I'm rooting for them. And look, fine, maybe I'm an Iriola fangirl at this point, but they've won 6 out of their last 8 in all competitions. They've scored 22 goals in the process and kept 3 clean sheets, and they're just a brilliant side to watch. That said, if you've watched this channel before, and if you haven't watched this channel before, by the way, now would be an amazing time to like and subscribe. But if you have watched this channel before, you'll almost certainly know that I'm a massive Vitor Pereira fan at Wolves, and I've defended them during a really bad run of results when I think their performances have been really, really good. And look, they lost last week at Anfield, and I thought they were really good then as well. Look, they played Liverpool off the park in the second half. We were not great, but they were really good, and Kuna scores a great goal. They could come to this game against Bournemouth, I think, with real confidence, and I still think they're going to be safe. I think they're going to be fine. I've no worries at all about Wolves. Maybe that's me being complacent, but if you're a Wolves fan, let me know. If you're a Wolves fan, are you feeling anxiety and dread? Maybe you would if it's your own team, I guess, and maybe you've got a blind spot for that, but I love the way you go forward. I think you've got some fantastic players, Kuna being the obvious one, but not forgetting the likes of João Gomez, Ait Nouri, even Agbadou, who's recently come in January. I think he's done really well for Wolves since coming in, so I think this will be a really good game, a really interesting game, maybe even a high-scoring one to watch, but I think I'm just going to have to go with Bournemouth to win, just about. I think Wolves have certainly got it in them to pinch something, but I expect Bournemouth get the job done. So I think Bournemouth take this one, and I think they're going to be relatively comfortable as well. I think they'll just have a little bit too much in attack with Ouattara and Clivert. The pace from them two on the counter-attack is astonishing. It's difficult for any team to keep up with, so I think Wolves will probably struggle with that, and I'm going to go for 3-1. I think Bournemouth 3, Wolves 1. Let me know what you think. Next up in the Saturday 3 o'clocks is another huge game in the title race. It's Arsenal against West Ham from the Emirates Stadium. I think Graham Potter has made a difference since he's come into West Ham. He's made them, I guess, fractionally harder to score against, which is only really a half compliment, but it's the best I can muster thus far. They've lost 4 out of the 6 games that he's been in charge of, and they've gone from conceding 3, 4, 5 a game when they were under Lopetegui to maybe only 1 or 2 a game under Potter, and they are a little bit tighter, but they're still just as abject in attack, and that's probably reflective of the fact that, look, Antonio's out, they've had some injuries up there, obviously Bowen's been out a little bit, and they've been a bit disjointed in attack. lost some players in midfield as well. Just trying to adapt to this new system under Potter. It feels like they're waiting for the summer, doesn't it? Maybe there's changes afoot, maybe Kudus leaves and they use that money to invest in the squad and bring in a few new faces across the team. But as it stands at the minute, they look really, really difficult to back, I guess. That's the only thing I'd say. I want to see him win. I really do. I want to see him get something in this one. And look, I'm sure they'll come and they'll set up deep and they'll frustrate and be stubborn. And Arsenal have struggled against teams like that. When they've had their best attack, they struggled against an Everton team that played like that, didn't they? With Sean Dyche, went to the Emirates, set up very deep, low block, and Arsenal's attack couldn't break through that day. That's exactly the sort of reason why Arsenal fans have been bleating and crowing online for a long time about we need a striker, we need someone who'll help us, eke out those 1-0s. That's what wins you titles, and it's those games where Arsenal have struggled, and maybe it's just hopium again. I'm just trying to think of ways in which West Ham could get a result. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Arsenal will get the result, even with the attack that they've got. I think Wanuri was brilliant against Leicester last week. He was different class. He was fantastic. For a 17-year-old kid to come into a team that, I wouldn't say the team's struggling because they're still second and they're still through in the Champions League and still a very good side, but the attack's struggling. I'm sure Arsenal fans, you'd afford me that comment, right? The attack is struggling. And for Wanuri to come in and do that, I thought was really impressive. Raheem Sterling, that's as bad as I've ever seen him. As a Liverpool fan, I watched him come into the Liverpool side and it looked like he was the 17-year-old kid, not Wanuri. So Arsenal are going to need an awful lot more from him. Maybe they don't start him, I don't know, but they've not really got a lot of options. They're probably going to have to play, does Arteta play Marino up there? Again, after, the result, he comes on against Leicester and scores twice, really impressive. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to go for an Arsenal win. I can't see anything other than an Arsenal win. It might even be a comprehensive Arsenal win because something tells me, at time of recording, by the way, I should say that Liverpool haven't yet played Aston Villa. I'm recording this on Wednesday evening, just before the Liverpool game. So, and something tells me that Liverpool might drop points against Villa. If we have, then maybe Arsenal come into this one with real positivity to try and close the gap and narrow it down to, what would it be, 5 points, wouldn't it, before Liverpool plays City on the Sunday. And something tells me that's exactly how the cards are going to fall. I think Liverpool might just draw tonight. And I don't know, maybe by the time you're watching this, you know the result. But something tells me Liverpool might drop points against Villa. And then Arsenal go into this one with real confidence and maybe make a, lay a marker down against West Ham. Hopefully that's not what happens. And but hey, we'll see. It's going to be really interesting. I think I'm going to go for 2-0 Arsenal. I think they struggle to break West Ham down and then they nick one towards the end. West Ham have to come out and then Arsenal pinch another one on the counter-attack. So I'm going to go for 2-0 Arsenal. Let me know what you think. Next up is another Saturday 3 o'clock game, another London derby. It's Fulham against Crystal Palace from Craven Cottage. I think I've mentioned this in the last couple of videos actually, but Fulham are really going under the radar this season. Like, really going under the radar. They've lost twice in their last 15 games in all competitions, and now they've just gone to St James's Park and won 2-1, and then they've just beat Forest 2-1 at Craven Cottage. Craven Cottage, a notoriously difficult place for any team to go, and they come into this one barely 4-5 points off Champions League football next season. And do you know what? If you're a Fulham fan, how bad must that feel knowing that you dropped points at home to the likes of Southampton and Ipswich and got beat at home to Wolves? Like, the teams right down the bottom they've really struggled with. And I keep saying this every week. I know I'm like a broken record with that, but that must really grate if you're a Fulham fan, because they've done so well recently. They've won 4 out of their last 5 games. They're on a roll, right? They're absolutely flying at home. But then again, Crystal Palace are flying. Away from home, they've won 6 out of their last 8 games in all competitions. And the only 2 places they've not, actually, was at the Vitality, and we've just been talking about how incredible Bournemouth are, how difficult they are to face. And at the Emirates, they got beat in the Cup 3-2 at the Emirates. So, again, it's a tough one to call this. And as much as I like Marco Silva and I respect the job that he's doing, and I really do want Fulham to make Europe next season, I really like Oliver Glasner as well. And I know they've had some issues with the home record recently at Selhurst Park, but actually their away record's been really, really good. And I think I might just have to sit on the fence on this one. I think I'm going to go for a tight, fairly even game. Jean-Philippe Mateta's still on fire. Raul Jimenez is on fire. I'm going to go for Fulham 1, Crystal Palace 1. My dad thinks Fulham are going to win. Let me know what you think. Next up, another Saturday 3 o'clock kickoff. It's Ipswich Town against Tottenham Hotspur at Portman Road. And I was really impressed with Ipswich last week at Villa. Do you know what, as well? The fact that they've brought Alex Palmer in from West Brom. I think that was only his first or second game. And I'd say one of the main reasons that Ipswich have struggled this season, to be honest, is that goalkeeper position. Because it's so crucial, isn't it, to how a team sets up, and that giving that base from the defence to work from. It feels like there's not been an awful lot of confidence in any of the keepers that Kieran McKenna has put out this season. I've seen Walton make some horrendous errors, Muric of course as well. You know, they still haven't won in their last 6 league games, Ipswich, going back to, I think, the Chelsea game in December, wasn't it? But if you just look at the 2 performances in isolation, since Alex Palmer's come into the club, I think it's made a big difference, because they win at Coventry 4-1, fantastic win. You know, Coventry, a team thriving under Frank Lampard. They've got aspirations of their own to come up to the Premier League soon, and I'm sure they will. And then they go to Villa Park, you know, a really tough place to go for any side, but especially for a side that's down there in the relegation zone. And Villa have got a phenomenal home record. What is it? One defeat in 12, 1 defeat in 13 prior to Ipswich going there. So unbelievable record. And Ipswich had a real task on their hands, and they performed amazingly well with 10 men for most of the game as well. And I think Palmer could make a really big difference for Kieran McKenna in the games that's left for Ipswich this season. You know, they've still got an outside chance of staying up. They're certainly within touching distance of Wolves, aren't they? You know, a win here, they get out of the relegation zone potentially. So it can all change very quickly. And look, another side that's seen the goalkeeper coming back in and having a big effect are Spurs. You know, Vicario came in against Man United. All of a sudden, Spurs look a little bit more confident at the back, don't they? I mean, we've seen Vicario coming in, just settles that whole back line down. You know, the way he talks to his defence, the way he brings confidence, comes out and claims crosses, takes the pressure off the defence. It's really important having a goalkeeper back there that you can rely on, that can pull off the occasional worldie and dig you out of trouble, but just generally that you can rely on not to do anything silly. And Vicario's in that mould, and I think he could be a game changer for Spurs between now and the end of the season too, much in the same way that Palmer could be for Ipswich. So I think this game might be decided by the goalkeepers, funnily enough, especially seeing as, if not for those 2 coming back, it would have been 2 keepers in net that, you know, have got a track record of throwing them in. So I think Spurs have got a good chance. They're still very much one eye on Europe, you'd have to say. It's getting to that stage of the season now with Spurs, isn't it, where the fans are getting a bit restless. They want a trophy, and they've got a chance in Europe, certainly. I think they've got a very good chance, especially if they can get some of the players back. If Romero and Van der Ven start coming back, they've got a good chance. So this one's a difficult one to call, and I think I'm going to go for a point. I think Ipswich get something. I really do. I liked the way they defended last week against Villa. Ipswich Town 1, Spurs 1. My dad thinks Spurs are going to just nick it. Let me know what you think. So next up, another Saturday 3 o'clock kickoff. It's Southampton against Brighton. Another battle of the South Coast. We had one last week. Southampton against Bournemouth, and Bournemouth won that one fairly easily, and I think Brighton just might do this one too. Brighton are just in that little sweet spot, aren't they? They're in 10th, but they're just outside the European places. You know, I think if Villa have got a chance, and we're saying Fulham have got a chance, we've kind of got to say Brighton have still got a chance. You know, they beat Chelsea in those last 2 games back-to-back, but I'm not really sure how much emphasis or merit you can place on those results, because Chelsea were pretty dreadful. Brighton were great too, don't get me wrong, but Chelsea were pretty poor. And I think coming into this one, this has to be a win for Brighton. If they've got any hopes at all, any hopes of reigniting those European ambitions, those European aspirations, they've got to win. Absolutely have to win. For Southampton, again, you'd have to say this is one of the very few winnable games for Southampton. There's not many in the Premier League, if any. You know, all games are difficult, whether you're top of the table or bottom. They're all tough. But for Southampton, they've got to start picking up points. It's as simple as that. I mean, they're 10 points, effectively 11 points with the goal difference, 11 points from safety, and they're on course to be one of, if not the worst Premier League side in history. You know, they're up there with that Derby County side. And as much as I respect the job that Ivan Juric has done since he's come in at Southampton, because I think he's making lemonade out of lemons. Like, I think they're a championship side for sure, but he has made a difference. He has made a difference. He's done very well since he's come in, and they are playing with a little bit more energy, a little bit more tempo, and I don't know, maybe they can make a game of this. You know, they took the lead in a few games by surprise recently. Newcastle at home, Man United at Old Trafford, you know. So maybe they can spring a shock, I don't know. But something tells me that Brighton are going to win this one again fairly comfortably. The same way that Bournemouth did, and I think that's probably the scoreline I'm going to go with. I'm going to go for Southampton 1, Brighton 3. Same result as Bournemouth last week. Let me know what you think. So next up is the Saturday 5:30 late kickoff, Aston Villa v Chelsea at Villa Park. And again, I've got to point out at time of recording, I have no idea what's happened in the Aston Villa v Liverpool game. It's Wednesday night, Aston Villa v Liverpool are just about to kick off as I speak, and I can only really go off what happened in the Aston Villa v Ipswich game. So I have no idea. Hopefully, if I'm talking to future you right now, Liverpool are 10 points clear. However, I do think personally that Aston Villa are going to get a point. Anyway, that's irrelevant for this game. Aston Villa, I think, are in a really good run of form at home in particular, and Chelsea are in a dire run of form, whether it's home or away. So I think we all know where this is going. Chelsea have 2 wins in their last 9 Premier League games. That is not Champions League football. And, you know, they've dropped out from a potential title race in December to now they're really struggling for Europa League positioning, you know, let alone Champions League positioning. And it's not even necessarily the results that's been so shocking with Chelsea. It's the performances. I can't understand what they're doing. It feels like Cole Palmer's just isolated, you know, such a top footballer, but he's not really getting any support. It's really difficult to see what Chelsea are going to do to get the ball to him, and I think with Nicholas Jackson out, they've struggled as well. And for that reason, I just can't see him getting a result at Villa Park. Even a draw, I think, would be a great result for Chelsea. I just don't think they're going to get it. Villa is a tough place to go. Really tough place to go. They're unbeaten in 12 games, maybe 13, depending on what's happened in the Liverpool game, but unbeaten in 12 games at time of recording, so difficult place to go, and I just think Chelsea are going to struggle again. I think they're in a really tough place, and look, we've all seen how this movie finishes, haven't we, with Chelsea managers under pressure. I think Enzo Maresca's playing a very dangerous game, and it wouldn't surprise me if we see him gone before the end of the season. You know, Chelsea's owners, Todd Bowley, Clearlake, they wrote a very, very big cheque, didn't they, to get Chelsea into a strong position, you know, to be able to qualify for the Champions League every year, and not just that, but to be challenging on all fronts. And actually, arguably, they look weaker than they did before. You know, they've got no solid goalkeeper. The spine looks really flimsy. And in attack, they don't look like they have many options either. Apart from Cole Palmer, you know, Sancho's not been a phenomenal signing. Nicholas Jackson's early season form has kind of drifted away a little bit. Neto's not been the signing that I think they were hoping for. And João Felix has moved on loan. And there's just some really, really puzzling signings, I guess, from Chelsea that I just don't think have worked out. And I think it's just another example of them not really being joined up thinking at Chelsea, from top to bottom, from the manager all the way up to the ownership. They all seem to have very different ideas on what players are needed, what system is required, and what the profiles of those should be. But I guess we'll see. It remains to be seen, doesn't it, what the rest of the season brings for Chelsea. But in this one, I think they're going to lose. So I'm going to back Aston Villa to have bounced back from the defeat against Liverpool in midweek, and have taken the win in this one. So I'm going to go for Aston Villa 3-1. Aston Villa 3, Chelsea 1. Let me know what you think. So on to Sunday's games, and first up it's Newcastle against Nottingham Forest from St James's Park. Newcastle have just gone off the boil a little bit, haven't they, in recent weeks? They've lost 3 out of their last 4 Premier League games. They got battered last week against Manchester City, a really poor performance, that one. Got beat at home against Fulham before that. Obviously they won against Southampton, which they fell behind in. They weren't brilliant against Southampton, but they did go behind. And then they got battered at home to Bournemouth before that. So they have just fallen ever so slightly off. I think this is a really big game for Newcastle. They have to show and prove something in this one. And look, Forest weren't great. They lost away to Fulham last week, and I think for both of these sides, they're just starting to fall away a little bit. The performances recently for Forest haven't been as good. You know, we saw that 5-0 away to Bournemouth. Obviously, they got straight back to it with a big win at home to Brighton, but then they lose to Fulham last week at Craven Cottage. So both sides have been terrific all season, and at different points of the season, I've said, I just can't see them not being in the Champions League next season. But I think for both of them, actually, it might be in question, you know. It's really difficult to call this one. It's a really, really tough one to call because I think both sides have obviously lots of ability, lots of talent in the ranks. I'm sure Chris Wood will have a point to prove coming into this one. And I don't know. I think I'm seeing a high-scoring draw. That's all, because I think both sides will really want to win and want to sort of lay down a marker. Newcastle in particular, I think the atmosphere at St James's Park will be really up for this one, and I just suspect it's going to be a high-scoring draw. I'm going to go Desmond. I'm going to go 2-2. Forest have got goals in them. We've seen that with Chris Wood, and defensively they've not been as assured as they have been in the early parts of this season, let's say that. So I think they can be got at. I think Newcastle will get chances. Obviously, Isak, Gordon, Murphy's been playing really well. I think they will get more chances, and I think they'll give up some chances as well. I think I said this in the live, actually, watching the City v Newcastle game last week, that they just give up so many chances, Newcastle. Like, there's just the Trippier one for the first City goal is madness. Absolute madness. And that basically changes the game, and it'll be something like that again in this one. Newcastle have just lost that little bit of robustness at the back, I think. I don't know what it is. I don't know, maybe Dubravka and Pope not having that solid goalkeeper that we talked about earlier. It does make a massive difference. Trippier, Livramento, changing that around. It's not quite worked for Eddie Howe. And Forest will get chances. I think they might take one of them, maybe two of them. And I think Newcastle on the attack with Isak and Gordon, they are lethal, aren't they? They'll get some chances too. So I'm going for 2-2. You let me know what you think. My old man's gone for a 2-1 win for Newcastle. Maybe he just thinks it's the start of the decline for Forest, and maybe they don't make those Champions League positions. What do you think? On to the final game of this game week, and it's Manchester City v Liverpool, and what would have been in years gone by the absolute pinnacle of English football. It's just not that at the moment with City, is it? I mean, I think they're still a fantastic side. Don't get them wrong, don't get it twisted. Manchester City are a brilliant side, and we saw glimpses of that last week against Newcastle, didn't we? Again, at time of recording, it's not going so well for them against Real Madrid. But, you can't hold that against them. Real Madrid's a tough place to go. I don't think that necessarily means they're anything other than a very good side in a difficult game. So I think City will still be a very tough test for Liverpool. And at time of recording, I have just seen Liverpool get a draw at Aston Villa. And I wasn't too disheartened, I've got to say. I'm not blown away by Liverpool's performance. I didn't think it was terrific. But equally, I didn't think it was bad either. And Villa Park, again, tough place to go. They're unbeaten in 13 games there. So, bit of respect, A point at Villa Park, it's not a bitter pill to swallow at all. That's a tough place to go. We've got a point. Happy enough with that. It's not the title race of years gone by between these two, where you needed 95 plus points to secure the league title. It's not that. You can afford to make mistakes. There will be twists and turns. Liverpool will drop more points. We will. We might drop points against City. But I think Arsenal will as well. Arsenal have got West Ham this weekend. That's maybe not a banana skin. I think Arsenal win it. I've already said that in the predictions. But they've got Nottingham Forest not long after that. They've got to go to Old Trafford not long after that. And as bad as United are, still a tough place to go. They've already beaten Arsenal once this season. So, look, I'm not for 1 second going to sit here and say that I think this is a decisive game in the title race. I don't think it is. I think Liverpool could lose this one. I don't think we do, but I think Liverpool could lose this one and we'd still win the league. So I'm not going to do the whole clickbait thing of this is a huge game in the title race, it's decisive. Well, it is, yeah, it's a big game, but all games are big. This is no bigger than any other in that it's 3 points. It actually doesn't make any more difference than the game tonight. City have a fight of their lives on for the top 4 now. They need to try and secure Champions League football for next season. I still think they will do that, whatever happens on Sunday. I don't even think Liverpool are tiring. I know that accusation's been levelled at Liverpool by certain parts of the media and certain parts of the Arsenal fan media to try and create something in this title race against Wolves in the second half. I don't think we were leggy. I just think Wolves were better and we probably took our foot off the gas a little bit. We were a little bit complacent at 2-0 up at half-time and we left the door open. That was the problem. Now, I think tonight Liverpool have played very well against Aston Villa. We've pressed very well. We've created some really big chances. We forced Aston Villa into some massive errors. And, we really should have won that game. How Jota misses one or two. Darwin Núñez misses an absolute sitter. It's taking those chances that's the big thing in a title race with City. That would be a conclusive thing. That would be a really difficult thing to accept, a really bitter pill to swallow. Whereas I don't think it is in this title race. I think Liverpool aren't going to need 95 plus points to win the league. We'll probably win the league with maybe 82, 83, maybe 80, who knows. And part of that is because the rest of the league, it does feel like the rest of the league has stepped up a little bit. City have gone off the boil, of course, but look at Bournemouth. Look at Forest. Look at Fulham. This is a game that in normal seasons would be massive, and it will still be sort of paraded as a big, massive game on Sky, and it's a huge one in the title race, but it isn't. It's 3 points. And actually, as a Liverpool fan, I'm content with one. If we go to the Etihad and we get a point after getting a point at Villa Park, I think it means we do have to beat Newcastle at Anfield next week. I'll say that. It doesn't open the door massively for Arsenal because they're going to drop points as well. Absolutely guarantee you that Arsenal drop points in at least one of, West Ham, Forest or United. They'll drop points in the next 3 games. I am certain of it. If they haven't, you can revisit this and we can settle it. I'll do some forfeit, whatever. I'm not here to talk about the title race. I'm here to talk about City v Liverpool. I think that City will get a point in this one. I think City are going to get a point in it. And I'm saying that because if they've been stuffed in midweek by Real Madrid, they'll be on the floor. I think they'll need that confidence boost. And I think that Pep Guardiola is exactly the manager to give them that. So I expect we'll see a very, very good game of football. I think Liverpool get a point. I'm going to say Liverpool get a point. I'm going to go for 2-2. Again, I think there's going to be goals in this one. I think the way that Marmoush has hit the ground running at City, I think the way the City defence has been playing recently, they've left the door open quite a bit in games. Even in the Newcastle game last week, they win 4-0, but they give up some chances to Newcastle. They really did. And I think Liverpool's press, as I've seen tonight against Aston Villa, Liverpool's press is up there with the very best, if not the very best. I think Liverpool score, I think City score, and I think it's a draw. So I'm going to go for 2-2. Manchester City 2, Liverpool 2, goals galore. It'll be a great game to watch, plenty of action. Liverpool get a point and stay top in the title race. And yeah, my old man thinks Liverpool are going to nick it 2-1. Of course he does, because he's a Liverpool fan. He's a bigger red than me and he's more biased. I am doing a watch-along, by the way. I'm doing a watch-along. If you fancy coming and joining me, it'd be fantastic to have you. I'm going to be doing watch-alongs on Saturday and Sunday. The Everton game v Man United, Saturday 12:30. I'll be here at 3 o'clock for Arsenal v West Ham. Really looking forward to that one. I'll be here for the 5:30 Aston Villa against Chelsea as well. And then on the Sunday, I'm really looking forward to Newcastle and Forest. And then obviously City v Liverpool as well. So I'll be here for all of those. Come and join me. If you haven't already, please like the video. It makes a massive difference. I don't want to beg, but please like it. If you can, subscribe as well. Follow. I'm across all the platforms. I'll put all the links in the bio, in the description. And thanks again so much for watching. Even if you haven't followed, I really appreciate you just watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.